How many questions have you answered about the Bears while you've been there?
A lot. I was talking to our guy, Adam Hoagie, obviously, at Adam Hogue, but I call him the Hoagie Man. He's great. And tell you what, he said, he sums it up nicely. He was like, I'm willing to bet the third most talked about team right now in the Super Bowl week is the Bears. And I would say that not just for Chicago-based shows, but all over the map, I've been asked plenty about what is going to become the biggest story in the NFL, and that's what the Bears decide to do with that number one pick, which is, I don't know, what are we at, like 85 days away from the draft now?
Well, that's a long time, but it seems like it just
it's great for content, though.
Yes, it just gets ratcheted up every day, and we're talking to Field Yates from ESPN. Now, the journey that you talked about, that Cam wanted to talk so much about, you started it. Let me refresh people. You were at the New England Patriots as an intern. Then you went to the Kansas City Chiefs as a scout, and that's where you met, of course, Ryan Poles.
Young Ryan Poles, yeah.
Or young Ryan Poles, but this is about you right now and your scouting ability. So if you had whatever tools you needed to scout Caleb Williams, what would you write down? How would you describe about Caleb Williams as a quarterback and what you know about him right now if you were working for a team?
Yeah, so we always start with, like, the physical build of a player. So Caleb is not, I mean, he's like 6'2". Like, he's not an overwhelming prospect in terms of his size, but that is certainly not something that's going to be a deterrent for him at the next level. He's plenty big enough. The arm is incredible. He has phenomenal accuracy. Everybody knows about the magician-like ability to navigate the pocket and throw on the run. That's probably the most impressive part of his throwing game is throwing on the run. As a right-handed quarterback, like running to his left or plays where he throws back from across his body, which is oftentimes a quarterback no-no, but when you're as good as Caleb Williams is, you can get away with it at the college level. You know, this season was a disappointment for USC as a team, and it was a backward step in terms of production for Caleb this season. But I think part of the reality for that, guys, is he won the Heisman last year with, like, one of the single greatest college football seasons we've ever seen. I'm not saying this is the exact one-for-one comparison, but, you know, Patrick Mahomes' first season as a full-time starter, he had 50 touchdown passes, and everybody was like, it's about to be on. Like, you know, we're going to start to see 50 touchdown pass seasons every year. Then the following year, he dips to, like, 35, which was still, I think, most in the NFL, but it was 70% of the prior year. So I felt like Caleb's discount this year wasn't so bad that it made me feel entirely different about the kind of player that he is or he will become at the NFL level. There are a few questions for all these prospects to answer, but I think those guys have a real chance to kind of solidify where they stand at the Combine when he actually has a chance to meet with, in person, the Bears and a variety of other teams.
What are you hearing about where the Bears' interest is with regard to Caleb Williams, or is it too early to kind of connect any dots?
Yeah, I haven't heard anything, like, super specific other than, like, you know, hey, the Bears are absolutely fixated on him or they're, for some reason, off-put by Caleb Williams. I've heard none of that whatsoever. I will just say that, you know, in the informal polls you do from time to time with people around the NFL, that while there are three outstanding quarterback prospects in this year's class, Jayden Daniels and Drake May being the others, people who have studied this class or just have offered up an opinion on what the Bears might do certainly seem to be operating under the idea that the odds-on favorite is Caleb Williams to be the number one overall pick. But I would say that it's early enough in the process where, like, I'm trying to think of, like, the perfect parallel to what those odds mean to me. But I don't think anything is, like, final decision. I don't think that there is, like, a scenario in which, like, yeah, I think there are scenarios because we're so early in the process where, like, other names could be bandied about over the next 2.5 months.
Well, while you're in Vegas, if you were forced to put a wager down on what the Bears will do with that first overall selection, where would your money go?
It would be Caleb Williams. But, like, you know, and I'm not saying this because I know something. I'm not saying this because I have an opinion that's, you know, against Caleb Williams or in favor of somebody else. But I just, like, this doesn't strike me as quite as ironclad as, like, Trevor Lawrence in 2021, only because Caleb's season this past year wasn't great relative statistically, as I was saying earlier, to the one it was the year before, even though it was still awesome. I know that people are going to be weary of a guy who has one like off the charts season, which is the case for Jayden Daniels, but it was really good prior to that. And just like for the one thing that Jayden has that Drake and Caleb don't have going for them is that there's nothing that Jayden Daniels could have done this past season to improve his stock more than he did, right? So there are going to be some people that are saying, why not take a guy that we just saw carve up college football for a full season as opposed to two players who kind of had a lesser year relative to the year they had the prior season. So I don't know if I would bet my mortgage, but I would at least bet a decent amount on Caleb Williams.
Mm-hmm. If you were to sit down with him, and there has been some questions about whether it be leadership or other things, what would you want to know from Caleb Williams?
I got to be honest with you guys. I think some of it's been unfair to Caleb so far. I haven't heard anything from anybody that's been in that program or been around that program, when scouting Caleb Williams in person. And, these scouts go on the road and they do these in-person visits, and it's not just for one player, but obviously all of them are going to ask about Caleb Williams. And nobody that I've spoken with, and I can't say that I've spoken to every NFL scout that's ever been through the USC campus, but nobody that I've spoken with has told me, this character is such a concern that you need to be investigating it night and day until the draft begins. As a matter of fact, nothing even close to that. Honestly, I don't think character is like a red flag or leadership's a red flag for Caleb Williams at all. I will say this. Caleb Williams has not yet signed with an agent. And I'm not saying that every player has to have an agent. Lamar Jackson just showed that you can get a big-time deal done with an agent. I just think that I think an agent can help either squelch ideas or narratives or help educate people, right? That's somebody who's acting on your behalf. And in the case of many of the, a lot of the quarterbacks end up with the same kind of cluster of agents. They've got a direct line to people in the media that have massive microphones that can help kind of set the record straight when nonsense dribbles out into the ether. And so, I've seen or read or heard some of the stuff that people are kind of asking about. And I would just say, in my own sort of digging on it, I don't feel like a whole lot of it is particularly fair to Caleb Williams.
Field Yates joining us. It's Waddle and Sylvie on ESPN 1000. Do you believe a play to the Commanders for him is an overplayed story out there?
I do, just because we're connecting a dot, obviously, and them having the experience of Cliff Kingsbury being there for a year with him. But the reality is this: if you're going to make that move from 2 to 1, the only way that you're doing that is because you think it's Caleb or you think it's just one quarterback and nobody else that really moves the needle amongst these top prospects. It also means that you're paying, I think, at least 2 plus 40, the pick that you traded for Montez Sweat for, and your first round pick next year, maybe more guys. And after what Carolina experienced this past year, I think there's some scar tissue around the NFL on top of the idea that the Commanders might feel like, hey, Caleb's the best, but Jayden Daniels or Drake May ain't that bad either. So it's a fun storyline. It's going to be discussed a million times between now and when we actually get to the draft. But, I mean, I'd be, I don't know about stunned. Nothing would stun me, right? But, I understand the hurdles that exist to get a deal done between those two teams.
Field, how do you feel about Justin Fields and how he has performed as a Bear the last 3 years? And if, in fact, they do pivot and go in a different direction in the draft, what type of interest would exist out there, in your opinion?
I mean, Justin is kind of a Rorschach test, right? You see what you want to see with him. Generally speaking, if a quarterback has not proven in 3 years that he is absolutely, unquestionably the guy, it means he's probably not the guy. I've used this analogy before. If the Chargers had the first overall pick and not the Bears, and the Chargers still had Justin Herbert as their quarterback, would anybody be sitting here saying, the Chargers, maybe they trade Justin Herbert and they instead take Caleb Williams and start fresh? The answer is no, of course not, right? So that part of my brain says that in 3 years, not full-time starter, but, a chunk of that as a starter, we still haven't gotten to the point where we could state that Justin Fields is, without question, the future for the Bears. He's done enough at the same time that the conversation exists. So I really believe reasonable minds can disagree. So while my conclusion for this all would be that I would try to get whatever I could for Justin and then take the top quarterback on the Bears board at number 1. If someone told me that, like, 3 months from now, Justin's still the quarterback and the Bears have, 9 plus whatever other draft picks they get for number 1, which would probably be a boatload, like, I don't think that's some crazy concept. I just think, though, that if you told me I had to absolutely stake $50 million a year on Justin Fields for 5 more years beyond his 2 left in his current deal, I think there's just a lot more risk than there are for other guys who have done similar deals in the recent couple of years.
If they do trade him, do you see a connection with a team?
Everybody's going to do the Raiders thing. My feeling on the Raiders with Luke Getsy is that the Raiders are either all in or all out on that trade, right? Like, Luke either thinks that Justin's a stud and they can go to, they can really perform on a high level, or Luke would say, hey, maybe the quarterback was just as much the problem as I was last year, and I don't want any part of it, right? I think the teams you have to look at for a Justin trade are those that March obviously foretells a lot of April, right? But if, there's going to be only 2 teams that sign Baker Mayfield and Kirk Cousins, the 2, like, credible quarterback options in free agency. And there are a couple of potential moving parts guys that could be traded that are sort of lower level quarterbacks. Maybe some teams will settle there, but at the end of the day, you're going to have teams that don't get one of those 2 veterans, don't make any sort of notable move, and have a pick that's not in the top 3. It's going to be you're going to be talking about Atlanta. You're talking about the Raiders, maybe, or maybe not, as we just stated. Denver, teams like that. And some of them are going to end. Yeah, Steelers could be one as well, right, with Arthur Smith. So, like, it's going to be those kind of teams who don't have, like, great means to get a quarterback other than offering something that's a relatively nominal price. Well, I don't believe it's going to be a first-round pick, but, trading pick 45 or 50 is not a prohibitive cost for a reasonable roll of the dice.
Field, were you surprised the Bears decided to stick with Matt Eberflus with some of the names that were available out there on the coaching front?
No, not, surprised. Not entirely, guys. A lot of the coaches that were fired or, that teams parted ways with, it was kind of obvious the course had been run and it was just time to, make a change here. Felt like with the Bears, like, trending up towards the end of the season, obviously had a bit of a different outlook there. And it does seem like Flus has, a lot of support at the highest level. Sorry, this is Vegas for you guys.
Yeah, the Bucket Boys.
The Bucket Boys getting after it. So, I don't know, not totally surprised. Like, I don't really have a strong stance on it, to be honest.
Okay.
But it's a big year ahead.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, there could – listen, when you're drafting first overall and you do draft a quarterback, if things don't go well next year, then,
we know whose head rolls.
Yeah, exactly. So,
100%. Yep.
Interesting.
Totally.
With a guy like you, with your stature and young children at home, when you go to Vegas – Are you playing it conservative, or are
cutting it loose,
or are you cutting it loose?
I got kids I got to pay for, guys. So I'm cutting it loose. No risk it, no biscuit, baby.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. All right,
the great city out here. We make some donations to the great state of Nevada.
What happens on Sunday?
I think the Chiefs win 27-24. I feel like I've been asked that question so much. If I sound too matter-of-fact when I say that, it's only because I feel like I've had the canned answer by now. I'm going to make it really simple, is that I just don't have it in me to bet against Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid and Travis Kelce right now. Like, I'd love to give you some brilliant, nuanced take about, like blitz pressures the Chiefs can dial up, or run schemes that they, can give San Francisco fits with. But ultimately, it's like Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Andy Reid. Hard to bet against those guys.
Yeah.